his opening hand first.
Yeah, being on the play, pretty important for a deck like Blue-Red Pyromancer. Again, tempo, very important, getting that Delver Secrets into play on turn 1. But, you know, still, because they're so low to the ground and streamlined, they can actually function pretty well even on the draw.
Uppal going to start things off with a Flooded Strand. Down to 19 he goes. Going to consult the hand before figuring out which dual land he wants to grab, and he will go with a Tundra.
Okay, so that's good news for Eric. So that means that Deathrite Gem is likely not going to come down on turn 1 here, which is one of the ways that Justin can really jump ahead of the blue-red deck.
Feels like a Ponder or a Preordain to start things off here in round number 3. We could also just see him fetching just to fetch right now so he doesn't have to worry about Stifle, which is the little game you have to play in Legacy. You do not want to lose your land on the opening turns of the game. And also, the big key here is that Uppal knows who he's up against, which is Rill, and Rill is someone who always played Delver decks. So as a result, you can imagine that Rill would have access to Stifle this particular weekend. Now, it turns out that he doesn't, but because he is known for playing Delver strategies, it wouldn't surprise you that he has that. But at the same time, the funny thing is, you know, you search out a fetch land on turn 1, you can just get wastelanded then.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting decision because do you expose yourself to wasteland or do you expose yourself to Stifle? Eric's actually not playing any copies of Wasteland in his deck, which is surprising because you don't really see that very often with this type of strategy. So Justin might be very familiar with Eric's deck list.
Rill going to play a Delver of Secrets on turn number 1, something he is known for doing. And he will pass the turn back over to Uppal, who will take a draw here. He does have a Dark Confidant, in his hand. Also an Underground Sea. It looks like he's going to go with a Ponder.
Yeah, Eric must have breathed a sigh of relief when he didn't go end of turn Source to Plowshare Delver.
Uppal going to take a look at these 3 cards, decide if he wants to keep them or does he want to shuffle away. He's looking at a hand with a couple of lands. Again, I think there's a Dark Confidant hanging out over there. Uppal in his Ponder looking at a Liliana the Veil among those cards. He'll decide where he wants to place them in just a moment. Looks like he's happy with what he saw, so he'll keep. Does draw the copy of Liliana. Has not played his land yet for the turn, but we do know that he has one available. We'll say he wants to progress here. Going to go with a Misty. Sacrifice that right away. Again, this feels like to me like he's probably just playing around Stifle at this point. Yeah, and he just searches out an Underground Sea and just passes the turn back. Rill's going to reveal a Spell Pierce to his Delver of Secrets.
A great reveal there. Not only does it flip the Delver into an Insectile Aberration, but Spell Pierce now can potentially counter that Liliana that we saw on Justin next turn. Although Justin probably won't go for it now that he knows about the Spell Pierce.
Chances are. Chances are. Rill going to play an Underground Sea. It's going to give away a little information. This will give away a little more. Here's a young Pyromancer on turn 2.
So this is interesting. Justin might be able to, if Justin lets this resolve, he will be able to resolve his Liliana. However, does Eric have a Force of Will? That would be huge.
Brainstorm here in response to the young Pyromancer. Uppal picks up a dual land, a Wasteland, and a Batterskull. And it can't be a perfect Brainstorm at this point. He's going to have to draw one of the cards that he does put back because this is happening on Rill's turn. And the Brainstorm, honestly, did not really give him a lot of action either. Not the best Brainstorm we've ever seen.
And if you're Eric, you kind of navigate this matchup knowing that Deathblade likely doesn't really have Force of Will in their main deck. I mean, some versions play 3 copies. You don't really often see 4 copies of Force of Will. It's more of a metagame call. They usually board it in against combo decks. So he kind of feels confident that his spells are likely going to resolve.
Yeah, 3 copies of Force of Will here for Uppal. But, you know, this is a situation where I think, you know, if Force of Will takes care of the young Pyromancer, I think you're okay with that exchange.
Yeah, you're 2 for 1. Force of Will is not really a card that you're that concerned with, but again, Deathblade likely might not even keep them in after board.
So Uppal is going to now draw a card after he did resolve the Brainstorm. Flooded Strand, so he's going to shuffle one of the cards away. Figure out what land he wants to go grab. It's going to be a Scrub land. So now he has access to 3 colors of the rainbow. He just needs the 4th one, which is the Tropical Island. It doesn't look like he needs to search that up anytime soon. Let's see what he wants to cast on this turn. Does he want to play Liliana the Veil? Is playing Liliana even all that impressive here?
Well, it could potentially deal with the... I'd imagine if he down takes it and resolves, it will get rid of the Delver. But, yep, he looks like he's going to go for a Dark Confidant instead.
I think one of the interesting things, too, here is that, you know, Rill can... You know, he can bluff Dazes a lot.
Yeah.
Because like, people expect him to have Daze in his deck because it's a Delver deck. Of course you have Daze. But the reality is he doesn't have Daze. And, you know, how many people are going to realize that, over the course of the tournament? That's a good question. Is Lightning Bolt's going to target the Dark Confidant here? A young Pyromancer trigger is going to put a Chris Van Meter into play in just a moment.
Yeah, and the threat of Daze alone could have been enough for Justin to not go for the Liliana there. You're right. You assume, like I assumed, that these decks generally do play Dazes, particularly if you have a deck card like Young Pyromancer. So certainly just the threat of Daze alone could be good enough. You might not even need it.
So your 1/1 Elemental will come into play in just a moment. Now, Rill's going to attack here for 5. Uppal's going to go down even lower.
So this is a pretty good situation for Eric. He still has that Spell Pierce that he revealed the turn before. That can potentially stop any Planeswalkers from entering play.
Uppal picks up a copy of Jace the Mind Sculptor right now. Jace really not at its best in this board state. It's not terrible because it is Jace, but it's not great.
It's hard to get into play.
Yeah.
Eric looks like he has a Lightning Bolt in his hand as well. So Justin's definitely has his back against the wall right here.
And you can see how different the game is, when he doesn't have a Deathrite Shaman as opposed to when he does. Because if he was able to accelerate past some of this stuff, this wouldn't be that big of a problem. But he's got to play some relatively honest Magic. He's casting very powerful cards like Liliana and Jace, but if he's able to accelerate those ahead of schedule, it changes the way that Rill has to play the game. Rill can play a pretty conventional game of Magic right now with what his deck wants to accomplish. You see him casting Brainstorm on the end of Justin's turn to put another Elemental into play.
Yeah, like the way the game played out, he could have easily maybe got that Liliana to play earlier with the turn that Eric tried to cast that Pyromancer. So Deathrite Shaman definitely, obviously, one of the more powerful cards in Legacy. Very, very important in this matchup.
Looks like Uppal's going to take 7. Rill going to play a Volcanic Island and cast a Lightning Bolt, and that is going to do it pretty easy there for number 3 on our Season 2 leaderboard. Eric Rill wins game number 1 over Justin Uppal. Blue-Red Pyromancer up a game over Deathblade. As we turn our attention to the sideboards, we're going to start with Justin Uppal's, which I do have in front of me. And just like any good Legacy sideboard, a lot of 1s and 2s. 1 Seal of Primordium off the splash. All I can think is greedy right now. 3 Surgical Extractions, an additional Force of Will, 2 Thoughtseize, 1 Path to Exile, 2 Spell Pierce, a Flusterstorm, 2 Supreme Verdicts, and 2 copies of Zealous Persecution. You got to imagine Persecution's good in this matchup.
Yeah, that's huge. I used to play a Young Pyromancer Delver deck, and Zealous Persecution was always the card I was afraid of because even though it can't kill an Insectile Aberration, it kills everything else in Eric's deck.
We see Supreme Verdicts, which are a little slow, but we did see Uppal get to 4 mana that game. The thing about Supreme Verdict is, Uppal has a lot of creatures in his deck. He has Stoneforge, he has Deathrite, he's got the Singleton Dark Confidant, he's got 3 copies of True Name. Does he want to wrath those creatures away? I don't know if every game's going to play out the one like the one we just saw.
Yeah, and the other problem with Supreme Verdict is, you're getting to 4 mana. That means because you have no basics, that's potentially 8 Price of Progress damage.
Yeah.
And with cards like Snapcaster Mage to snap it back, you can just die to that spell alone. Yep. So it has to be a real concern for Justin to try to manage his mana. The deck can function on 2 to 3 mana. Does he want to try to get to 4? If he does get to 4, maybe he has to wasteland his own land. So he has to be very cautious of Price of Progress.
Other cards here, you could make an argument for boarding in additional Thoughtseizes, the Singleton Path to Exile, heck, even the Spell Pierces and the Flusterstorm here as well. So we'll see which route Uppal decides to go as he's taking his time here in sideboarding. As far as our Rill's concerned, what do you have over there?
So he's got an extra copy of Price of Progress that he can board in to go up to 3. He's got 3 Lava Spikes, 1 Pyroblast, 1 Rill Elemental Blast, 2 Sulfuric Vortex, 2 Surgical Extractions, 2 Smash to Smithereens, 1 Vendilion Click, 1 Grim Lavamancer, and 1 Spell Pierce. Now, obviously, the Price of Progress I like a lot in this matchup because of the number of non-basics. It allows you to kind of win games out of nowhere. Smash to Smithereens, another card. Just because if you're playing against Stoneforge Mystic decks, you really can't let the Batterskull get out of hand. Plus, it's another way to deal damage to your opponent. Grim Lavamancer is another card that I actually kind of like, particularly if you're on the draw, just because it's another way that you can kind of kill Stoneforge Mystic. You can get it into play on turn 1. It also kills Deathrite Shaman, which is very important. So I definitely like the Grim Lavamancer as well. The other cards, I'm not sure you want that much permission. I mean, Pyroblast, Red Element Blast, perhaps just as a way to kind of deal with Jace, but I'm not even sure that you're that concerned with Jace. Really, I think it's kind of like Price of Progress, Math to Smithereens, probably Grim Lavamancer, and then maybe 1 Spell Pierce just to stop an early Liliana.
Yeah, I mean, just a lot of options available to both players. The thing I really like about Legacy is just, you can sideboard so many different ways. You can make arguments for so many different cards coming in and out of decks. Because these sideboards are all 1s and 2s, and, what cards are more important. Dark Confidant is one of the best cards in Magic history. Do you leave that card in this matchup? Can you afford to deal yourself points of damage to draw extra cards? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's pretty tough. I think I'm always of the impression that it's hard for you to ever board out Dark Confidant if you have it. But I'm with you. It's like the format's so diverse, especially with the sideboards that you're seeing. You see a lot of 1-ofs and 2-ofs simply because when you have a decks with Ponder and Preordain and Brainstorm, you kind of see a lot of your deck throughout the course of a game. So having 1-ofs and 2-ofs makes a lot more sense in a format like Legacy, particularly when you're playing Brainstorm-based decks. Plus, it allows you to have a slightly more diverse sideboard, which is something you really need in a format like Legacy, because you can play against 8 different decks throughout the course of a tournament. So you need all those cards.
Yeah. And I think that's, again, that's just one of the things that makes me really enjoy this format. You know, when you take a look at Esper Deathblade, it just has the most powerful cards, and some of the most powerful cards in Magic history. And it's like, yeah, of course you're supposed to board out Jace, duh. It's like, what are we talking about here? Thoughtseize, you can't have that in your deck. It's, you know, just one of the best 20 cards of all time, or something like that. You know, the Singleton Vendilion Click, is that supposed to stay in? You know, I think arguments can be made for both sides. That's what makes it really, really interesting to play the format and watch the format. See how players kind of approach things and what they do bring in and what they do bring out in particular matchups.
Yeah, and I think the good thing about this particular matchup from Eric's side is that he's going to be doing the same thing he does every game. Like, he doesn't care that much what Justin does. He's going to be the aggressor. Therefore, all the pressure is really on Justin to kind of stabilize and make sure he doesn't lose out of nowhere to cards like Price of Progress. So I think if you're Eric, you're kind of confident in this type of tournament because obviously you're going to play against a wide variety of decks, but your strategy is largely going to be the same all the time. You have Force of Will, which is good against combo decks, and then you have Burn, which can be good against the control-ish types decks or the mid-range fair decks.
Well, game 2 will be underway here for these two very talented players. Eric Rill did win game number 1. Chris Van Meter with an 0-2 start means that Rill can really try to take advantage here. The fact that Chris was not able to put together a good finish in the Legacy portion. Now, of course, Chris making the top 4, getting 10 points in the Standard Open, so he's up to 157. The lead is 30 Open Series points right now, which seems like a lot because it is a lot. But again, if Rill can make a top 8, maybe put together another win, which again we've seen him do in Legacy, he could catch right back up. You see Uppal's going to sacrifice Looted Delta, get a Tundra out of his deck right away. Again, try to play around Stifle, but he doesn't even know it's there. And, you know, if we were to watch Rill's matches over the course of the weekend, I wonder how many people would do this.
Yeah, I think it's risky because, again, Wasteland or Stifle, what am I going to lose to here? I kind of don't really see the need necessarily to go for it because if he goes land go, that means there's no turn 1 Delver. So you're probably happy in that case. So it's a lot easier to play around Stifle than it is Wasteland. Yeah. So not necessarily sure this is always the optimal play, but either way, I think Eric is, again, breathing a sigh of relief. He doesn't have to deal with turn 1 Deathrite Shaman, and he doesn't have to deal with Plowshare on my Delver Seekers.
Also, don't forget, you know, when you sacrifice a fetch land, it might not seem like that big of a deal. And yes, it can make sense to play around Stifle, even though Uppal doesn't know it's not there. But, you know, if you're just sacrificing a fetch land to make sure you don't get hit by Stifle, that makes your Brainstorms a little bit worse. Yeah. Because you have one less fetch land to shuffle away.
I think, again, it's the same thing. If they're playing Stifle, they're likely playing Wasteland. And which one are you playing on? It's likely that they have more Wastelands in their deck than Stifle. So I think it's really a tough call, but at the same time, I think the numbers probably suggest that you should probably play around Wasteland a little bit more than Stifle, but either way, Justin has both his lands still in play, and he casts the Swords of Plowshare. So that's step 1 in order for him to try to stabilize this game.
And you saw the way that Justin played the Swords of Plowshares. He played it on his own turn to play around Spell Pierce, but he also sacrificed another land before casting it, so he could play around Daze that does not exist.
Yep. So just the threat of these cards is forcing Justin to change his strategy slightly.
You see, he's going to play another spell with the mana available. This is a really powerful one in Stoneforge Mystic. Rill is going to cast a Brainstorm in response. He does have a Misty Rainforest in play. He will draw 3, put 2 back, and make it a perfect Brainstorm if he wants to by shuffling those cards away.
Yeah, it looks like he has a lot of cantrips in hand, 2 Ponders, and another Brainstorm.
A young Pyromancer hanging out. It looks like a Lightning Bolt as well. Again, Rill did win with 4-color Delver in Milwaukee earlier this year. And we have seen him make top 8s. We've seen him win in Cincinnati last year with Grixis Delver. So again, Delver is really where he's at home. We've seen him make top 8s with Storm, of course, last year in Somerset, the Legacy Open on the 3rd day of the Invitational there. So we know he's got a pretty wide range, but you know, him brainstorming and pondering, he's very, very comfortable doing that, as Uppal's going to search out a Batter Skull with the Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah, and Rill's got a pretty good setup for potentially next turn, he can go Pyromancer, Gataxian Probe. You see if the coast is clear, then Lightning Bolt your Stoneforge Mystic. But that's kind of a tricky play there, because if you play the Probe after you play the Pyromancer, and you end up seeing that he does have like a Spell Pierce, then suddenly you can't just Lightning Bolt the Stoneforge Mystic free and clear anymore. So it's kind of tough. Does he want to get extra value out of the Pyromancer, or does he want to make sure that Stoneforge Mystic is off the board? Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see what Eric does in his turn. Does he Gataxian Probe first, or does he try to get value out of it by playing the Pyromancer first, thinking that Justin probably doesn't have Spell Pierce in his hand?
And the tricky thing, too, is, we saw Uppal search for Batterskull pretty quickly. I don't think that, he's got Numasawa Shite in his deck. And we don't know if it's in his hand or not, but he didn't even think twice. He just give me a Batterskull right now. With the chances of Stoneforge Mystic, I think, dying, I think it's pretty high. Jite is equipment that you can cast, where Batterskull is an equipment that's very difficult to cast against a Delver strategy. Additionally, with the way that Justin's been playing these games so far, is he going to, when he finds his 5th land, is he just going to play his 5th land and slam down Batterskull? He's been playing around Days pretty heavily. It's basically a 6-mana spell. It's
pretty interesting there. I agree with you. A lot of times you see people get the Jite just thinking that that's the easier way for me to get that into play. But maybe he just thinks that if I can untap, I'm probably going to win.
Sure.
So I think it's a reasonable play to make there.
We're going to sacrifice an Arid Mesa, go get a basic mountain. You see him searching out basics to make sure that price progress doesn't hurt him too much, and he is going to lead with the Young Pyromancer and now a Gataxian Probe.
Wow, so fortunate for him, Justin just has a hand of lands and Batterskull. He doesn't have the Spell Pierce, so he will be able to cast Lightning Bolt targeting that Stoneforge Mystic to keep the Batterskull from entering play next turn.
I guess we'll have no problem casting Batterskull with 6 mana. Days.
So now I think we know what his strategy is.
And truthfully, I wouldn't be surprised if Justin is just going to slam down Batterskull when he finds his 5th land, because he has, depending on what he draws, he has no action right now.
Yeah, he has no action. The question is it going to help with the Young Pyromancer and all the cantrips in Eric's hand? He's going to be able to make a small army there.
That's a pretty big draw. A Stoneforge Mystic, which Uppal will cast in just a moment, I believe. So he will put the 1/2 into play. Gonna go with Diggin'.
So he can actually get the Jite here, too. He could even cast the Jite this turn if he wants.
I don't think I would be so surprised if he did. Like, given his actions, the way he's been playing so far, he's been playing around Days so heavily, I would be so surprised if he did.
But the thing you have to think about, though, is if you can get a Daze out of Eric's hand now, that means your Batterskull is more likely to resolve the following.
I 100% agree with you.
So I agree with you. Do you want to play around Daze, or do you want to just try to go for it? It looks like he's going to take the more cautious play and play the Creeping Target.
And we know he has other lands, as does Rill, so he could have just played a fetch land, sacrificed it, play Umuzawa Shite, your turn. Here's Gataxian Probe. Rill will get another elemental token. Here he sees the 2 pieces of equipment.
Yeah, he already knew what was in Justin's hand.
I really like your thought there, too, that if you can get a Daze out of his hand right then on the Jite, the chances of you resolving the Batterskull are higher. And I think Batterskull is the better of the 2 cards right now.
Yeah, that's probably what you care about most. But either way, we know that there's no Daze in Eric's hand. The question is Justin just going to go for it next turn? Like you said, he was playing around Daze last turn. If he played around the turn before, you expect him to probably play around it now. So
Magic is really easy when you get to work with perfect information.
With perfect information, it's great.
I like that a lot.
Well, Eric, though, is going to have a couple of more chances to try to draw into an answer for both the Stoneforge Mystic or the Batterskull. He has Smashed Smithereens likely in his deck still. Still has Chain Lightning, Lightning Bolt as well. Looks like he might have drawn a Chain Lightning there.
It looked like a red card. It is a Chain.
Yeah, so pretty good situation here. That Young Pyromancer is doing some serious work, putting in a pretty big army here. I think Justin's going to need to draw a Zealous Persecution real fast.
Mr. Rainforest is the land played here for Rill. He's going to sacrifice that. We'll see what he wants to search up as he just go down to 14. Young Pyromancer is a card that's been kind of looking for a home. The power level of the card is undeniable. I think everyone knows that this card's fantastic. It's just how do you incorporate it into some sort of Delver build, because you have to imagine it goes into a Delver deck. Young Pyromancer is friends with free spells and cheap spells. And Rill has been trying to make this work for a little while. And we've seen him actually win a tournament with Young Pyromancer in his deck in Milwaukee. It's certainly looking really good right now.
Yeah, when I came in second at the Legacy Champs last year, I had a Delver Young Pyromancer deck, and I was impressed. I had never played it before, and I was amazed at how powerful Young Pyromancer was. It was by far my favorite card in the deck.
Ponder gets another elemental token out there.
Oof.
I think we found a price progress, didn't we?
Wow, yeah. So he has Price of Progress. Justin has 4 non-basics in play now, and likely going to play another one after.
We're going to say chain that. Another elemental token here for Rill. Look at that group of creatures. In we come for 4. Uppal's going to go down to 14.
Brainstorm. Oh, another land. Wow.
If you're Justin, you don't really like. If you're Justin at this point, with how far behind you are on the board, you don't have a choice.
Yeah,
you
really
just have to
don't
cast
have a
Batter
choice.
Skull. If you get dazed, I mean, you were going to lose anyway. And if it resolves, truthfully, there's a pretty good chance he's going to lose.
Yeah,
because of the price.
Are you really going to go to 6 here against a burn deck that has Snapcaster Mage, Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, Price of Progress? I agree with you. I don't think Justin's happy about it, but yeah, we're probably just going to see Batter Skull.
No choice. Just has to cast it. Probably not thrilled about it. He's been trying to play around Daze the entire game. Can't afford to do it now. There's a Brainstorm. Rill's going to make another 1/1 in response. He'll get a couple cards deeper in his deck. We know he's going to pick up a copy of Price of Progress.
Snapcaster Mage too. So we know it won't matter. Yeah. But Justin still made the correct play. Yeah, I don't think there was really anything Justin could have done this game. Young Pyromancer was just simply too powerful. From turn 3 on, Eric was just able to build up an army, and Justin's draws were actually pretty terrible.
Yeah, I was going to say his draw, especially this game, was quite bad. I'm not sure the exact 7 that he kept, but I mean the draws after the 7 cards were pretty bad. It's been a lot of lands. Looks like Rill's going to come into the red zone here. He's trying to figure out how much damage will come through. You know, if he attacks with everybody, Young Pyromancer is the one that gets blocked. He gains 4 life, goes up to 18. That 18 is undone by 4 tokens, so you can say that he's at 14. -3 would put him down to 11. Price of Progress would deal 10. It would put Uppal down to 1. Rill would have to find a way to get 1 more point of damage across.
Yeah, so if he go, I think he has Snapcaster Chain.
Yeah.
So he should have just enough. He's probably a little bit wary, and even Force of Will would still kill him, I believe.
And the other thing, too, is Uppal, Rill knows the cards in Uppal's hand, for the most part, because of the probes earlier in the game. So here's the Price of Progress. That's a 10 ball. Uppal says, yeah, I'm at 1. Well, who cares? As Rill is going to take 2 from that. He's going to sacrifice this Misty Rainforest. Go hunting for a land. It's a volcanic island. Snapcaster Mage is going to show up to the party in just a moment. When it does, it'll target one of those 1-mana burn spells in the graveyard. Looks like it may be Chain Lightning. And we're going upstairs for the win, and that's going to do it. Eric Rill does defeat Justin Uppal 2-0. Blue-Red Pyromancer getting the job done over Esper Deathblade.
Whew. Yo, Blue-Red Pyromancer now at 3-0. I like this deck. I really like Young Pyromancer. I hope to see it continue to do well today.
I like this take on this deck because this isn't, you know, it's weird to say this isn't Blue-Red Delver because Delver's in the deck. When you think of Blue-Red Delver, you think of Andrew Schneider.
Yeah.
And you think of his win in Knoxville, his 3rd Legacy Open win of his career with that blue-red lava spikes in the sideboard, chains and bolts and goblin guides, and that's not what this deck is. You know, this is a blue-red Young Pyromancer deck that does, of course, have the Delver engine and probes and ponders and stuff like that, but it's not trying for this, you know, the burn-yacht approach of the blue-red Delver deck that Schneider plays.
Yeah, and it has the same feel as